Yay Networks.
I didn't get an answer. I got the, oh, so-and-so's sick, so-and-so, this is happening to this person. It was like, it was like my needs were not being met. And I'm like, it was almost like a guilt thing. It was very bizarre. And I was like trying to figure it out. And I'm like, it was deflecting the answer and then using some sort of trauma that was going on to, I don't even, please explain what that was.
Right.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Happily Ever Amber podcast. I am your host, Amber. Thank you, everyone, for coming back every week. Your support means the world to me. I am super excited about today's episode. We have Dr. Ramani, a returning guest. She did our last episode in December. You definitely want to go back and check out that episode and then jump into this episode. We are going to have a continuing conversation about narcissists. I've had a lot of experience dealing with abusive narcissist. And I say that only because I want people to know that you're not alone and there's a community of other people who have suffered or are still suffering. I'm going to jump into some of my personal-ish stuff today. I'm going to share some stories that hopefully I can get some answers to when it comes to dealing with narcissists. I want this platform to continue to be a place that's safety and people feel that they are heard and seen and that they can get useful tips. And Dr. Ramani is going to bring that today with her new book that's coming out February 20th. It's Not You. So I'm excited. Let's jump into the episode. Dr. Ramani, please, let's talk about narcissist and boundaries. And I'm so thankful, and I told you when you walked in, I'm so thankful that I found you. And, you know, people feel so lost when they're dealing with narcissist. And it could be such a dark hole to live in. And I just want to dive into, you know, setting boundaries, what it looks like, just tips for not only myself, but also for the audience.
Yeah, so the boundaries conversations are a really popular one right now. People think boundaries seem to be the answer. And this is the one place where it's a very tricky conversation because whatever boundary you set with a narcissistic person, they're never going to honor. And if anything, you're probably going to inflame the situation further. They're going to mess with the boundary. It's going to be one more thing they get to go after. So what I tell people when you're thinking about boundary setting in narcissistic relationships, it's an inside game. This is where you go inside and think to yourself, okay, give you a classical example of how to set a boundary in a narcissistic relationship. You don't share good news and you don't share bad news. That's a boundary, right? Why? Because if you share good news, they're going to mock it, minimize it, trivialize it, laugh at it, view you as a competitor and might make them angry. And so what's the point of that? It's just going to take something good that happened to you and kind of spoil the experience for you. If you tell them bad news, they're going to be inconvenienced by it, wonder what they're supposed to do about it, now sort of feel annoyed because they might have to help you with it. So it's a great example of how boundary setting can look, that you don't share either of those things with them. Or if you do it after and only after you've shared your good news, for example, with the people in your life who are happy for you. So you take that good news and you call that best friend or you share it with that mentor, whomever it is, that's like, oh my gosh, this is great. You're so wonderful. And you get that pride and that joy and that happiness people have for you. After you have that experience of feeling seen and heard and valued, and frankly, to celebrate it, then you can tell the narcissist, and if they do their usual, minimize, trivialize, whatever, it's not as hurtful as if that's your first stop. A lot of people make that mistake. I'm going to go to the narcissistic person. I'm going to tell them this wonderful thing that happened. That will bring them over. They will listen. They'll be proud. They'll be pleased. It's a way of saying, hey, look, other people think I'm great, even if you don't. That's a mistake. The mistake number two, that bad news piece, is because what happens with the bad news is often you need someone to be an empathic ear You may not need them to do anything, but you need someone to listen. Well, the narcissistic person definitely can't do that. Usually the people on your good news list are also the people on your bad news list. But you say, hey, this bad thing happened. Can I talk it through with you? And listen, the bad news person could also be a therapist, but you talk it through with them. If the bad news thing is something that potentially needs a solution, even still, you'd want to talk to someone else to figure out what would that solution be. The mistake people make is they keep going into the narcissistic relationship thinking, this time, they're going to want to help. This time, they'll do the right thing. And what they usually, if it's something that needs to be solved, they'll be irritated by it, how much it costs, or that they have to waste their time, especially if it's not that important to them. And so it takes the bad news and it makes it even that much harder to deal with. They'll make it about them, like, oh gosh, okay, so you're sick. What does that mean for now? What do I have to go to the doctor all the time with you? So they'll literally make it about them. That really only leaves you sharing indifferent stuff like the weather or some random thing that's happening down the street, or that there was an accident on the road or something like that. That's one example of what boundaries look like. But there's no version of you instructing them what to do and not do where you're concerned. So you might say with a healthy relationship, I'm going to give you a simplistic example. In a healthy relationship, you can say, hey, I don't want to talk. I don't do work calls like after 7 or before 7, like for those at that time. And a healthy colleague would say, absolutely not. I will file that away and I will circle back always in the morning. If you try to do that kind of structural boundary setting with a narcissistic person, either they'd say, oh, I guess you're not that devoted to the job, or like, oh, little Miss Princess thinks she can have her rules. Like you're going to get antagonized. So I think a lot of people then feel they're failing in the narcissistic relationship, or just failing in relationships because they're saying, I did what the books say. The books say boundaries. Repeat your boundaries. Say your boundary many times, and then they'll learn your boundary. Never.
So what do you do when they're not adhering to a boundary that you set?
You got to understand it's never going to happen. You radically accept that this is what it is, right, and make your decisions accordingly. Got
it. Okay. So what if you're dealing with, someone that's like a family member, right? Because I feel like boundaries, narcissistic, dealing it with in the workplace versus home, you kind of have to approach the situations a little bit differently.
Absolutely.
Right? Because you have the risk of getting fired or HR calling, and it gets complicated.
Right. But it's very different because even in a family, it's still not going to change. So in the workplace, you might actually have more recourse, right? You could say, I'm not doing, I'm in a salaried position, but I don't think that I should have to do this work in the night, or before my time starts at work. And you'd actually might have an authority you could turn to. It is conceivable, though, that you'll burn bridges in that job. That someone will say, well, so much for me giving this person a strong recommendation. I may not be able to get rid of them, but they are going to view you as having a low work ethic, even if that's in those 12 hours they've got you're working absolutely intensely. There's no version of this where you're going to bring the narcissistic person over to your way of thinking. I think we give people lots of self-advocacy tools, but we don't always prepare them for how the other person's going to receive them, right? Advocate for yourself, set a boundary, and it doesn't work. I mean, so if it doesn't work, then it's the radical acceptance that they're never going to honor this. So I need to proceed in this relationship accordingly.
And going back to your point before, in order to proceed to that new relationship, accordingly, knowing that you only give them, you never tell them good news or bad news.
Right. It might be time. It might be that you asked about families, right? Holidays are a big thing with families. Right? I mean, to use a classical example, or Sunday dinners or family events or whatever the thing is, right?
Birthday parties,
right? And at every single birthday party, every single one, there's a meltdown by this person. And why would this one be different? You'd say, well, I'm going to set a boundary with them. I'm going to say, if you do this, this, or this, I'm going to leave. Okay? They're going to do this, this, and this, and you're going to leave. But if the family system doesn't understand narcissism, then you're the bad person for leaving. Because you look like you're stonewalling. You look like you're not making compromises. You look like you're not doing the things that family system demands of you, right? It really, if everyone's not seeing it clearly, listen, some people might be thrilled, like, yay, someone's finally setting their foot down. But what's not changing is that that person's not saying the thing. And they will be very quick to say, this was a terrible day for me. I can't believe I hope you know the bad news I got this morning. I got this terrible news this morning.
Oh my
and
gosh.
that's why I'm reacting like this. And so really, and you didn't even stop to think how I'm doing. So now you do look like the bad guy. Even all you were doing is honoring your boundary.
That literally happened to me this weekend. I was having a discussion with someone in my life, and I had asked something, and it turned into like, it was a simple question, like very black and white, and I'm not going to get into it, but I think everybody probably can imagine who I'm talking about. And all of a sudden, it was like, I got this like story, I didn't get an answer. I got the, oh, so-and-so's sick, so-and-so, this is happening to this person. It was like, it was like my needs were not being met. And I'm like, it was almost like a guilt thing. It was very bizarre. And I was like trying to figure it out. And I'm like, it was deflecting the answer and then using some sort of trauma that was going on
Correct.
to, I don't even, please explain what that was.
Right. So ultimately, with this person, you were trying to do, like it was a schedule. I wanted to know the schedule. You wanted to a schedule.
Yeah.
Okay.
Simple.
And this person didn't want to give you that information, or they didn't have that information?
They just didn't know.
They didn't know.
They just didn't know at the time.
Okay. So was it, it wasn't as, the simple thing would be, I don't know.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
But that might make them look bad.
Right.
To not know. Right? So if you pushed it, I just want to know the schedule. Now you're really pushing on them not knowing, which again, now they don't know everything. They're not perfect. Right? And they might be perceiving you as being insistent.
Yeah, but they knew the schedule.
Okay. So they knew the schedule, and you knew they knew the schedule.
I knew they knew the schedule.
Okay. So in a way, them saying they don't is gaslighting you, whatever the power play was. Like,
yes.
Because it's a sin of omission, right? They know the schedule. You having that answer was important, and it becomes a power play that this person was able to engage in and play a game of cat and mouse with you, right? So you could push it. Now they're going to double down on their resistance. You've got to be prepared for that. And then if you push it too much, you're a bad person, and they're going to bring up whatever thing they bring up. So in an example like that, what I would instruct someone is, if you have to keep engaging with this person, and maybe you do, then the thing to do is to find another way to get that schedule. Unless this literally is the only human being on planet Earth who has the schedule. If there's another way of getting it, it might even be more time consuming. You have to put a value on your mental health. And for some people, they'll think, I am not asking this person this question, because if I go online and do the this and do the that, I can get this answer. And I think that's what that when I talk about workarounds, that's a classic example of one.
That's great. Thank you. I should have called you this weekend. I needed you this weekend. I want to shift really fast and talk about explaining to the younger generation, even for London and Riley, who are almost 14 and 10. How do you explain boundaries to younger kids?
So the conversation about boundaries is a complex one, because it's really important for young people to understand it, because not all people are narcissistic, right?
Do we have the data on, well, I don't know if there's accurate data on how many people are narcissists. It's not like...
We don't really have... Well, I'll go back to the boundary question. I'm going to come back to that question. So how do you teach a 14 to teenagers, young teenagers, how to set boundaries? Is that you teach them how to practice that in healthy relationships, right? So assuming that since they're your kids, you'd be a great place to start, that they can set a boundary. Maybe you're asking them something that they find intrusive, that they have the right to say, I'm fine, and I really don't want to talk about that particular issue because it involves my friend's privacy or something. That there are times that they can exert whatever. You might be making a clothing recommendation. They'll say, I prefer to choose my own clothing. That kind. They can make those things known. Or if they say to you, if they say, I want to, They can make a need known. I need to be picked up at a certain time. It's not quite a boundary, but it's communicating a need, which I file into the same folder as boundaries, which is being able to appropriately express a need without fear of being shamed. So teaching people that it's okay to have expectations of people that are within normal limits, to set standards, behavioral standards for people, that's okay. That's what we can teach our kids. And then they'll meet someone who doesn't honor them. And then they'll already have known that, okay, this doesn't feel right because they're not doing this thing that I was told it's okay to have expectations about. And then that they have tools to assess that situation. But what's not always going to work is, so just keep asserting your boundary, keep holding your boundary, keep sharing your boundary. At some point, you're going to feel like you're going insane.
Yeah.
And that's the struggle.
Yeah, and then guess what? It's like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die.
That's
And then pretty
exactly
soon
right.
you're like, you feel it's this like emptiness, and you just want to like scream at the top of the mountain because your needs aren't being met.
No,
And
they're not.
It's very, very frustrating. So I think that's very, very good advice. So if you could put it into words, right, for like setting a boundary, right? If we could, let's come up with a good example.
Yes.
Like, I mean, I'm probably, now I'm blanking, but I'm sure you can come up with one because you deal with this all the time.
A boundary might be, please don't, you tell someone ahead of time, please don't ask about my job search at the birthday party tonight. Okay, it's a sore topic, so please don't bring it up. I don't want to deal with it in front of everyone else, so please don't do that. Okay, that's a boundary.
Okay.
And then that night, people are talking about jobs, and that very person you said, please don't do this, said, but you're looking for a job, and you're like, and you're thinking, are you kidding me?
Yeah.
And then everyone's chiming in saying, what do you mean you're looking for a job? Like, I thought you were this and that. And say, no. It's like, I don't want to talk about, what do you mean you don't want to talk about? Like, what are you, like, not talking to the family now about these things? That's a big deal. And now the very thing you were trying to guard against and hedge against, this person had no regard. So then you take them aside later and you say, what were you doing? I specifically said one thing. I asked for nothing, and I asked for one thing, and you didn't do it. Stop making such a big deal. You make a big deal out of everything. What's your problem? This is your family. We can talk about this stuff. Like, so your family's concerned about you, and you're doing this? Like, you don't even want us to be concerned about you? Like, sorry, I didn't realize you were living in a police state. So now they've made you crazy.
Right. Oh
Right?
my gosh, yeah.
That's what I mean is how that doesn't work. But with a healthy person, if you called ahead and said, whatever happens, just don't ask about this. That even if all they were talking about that night were jobs and jobs and jobs and jobs, the healthy person would never bring it up once, might even just kind of give you a nod and say, I got you. I heard you. That's what a healthy person does.
I feel like there's a lot of narcissism now with that. That was such a beautiful example. I think, oh my gosh, how many times that has happened in my life where you're just like, please don't discuss, my salary, or please don't discuss where we are in our relationship, or please don't discuss, our X, Y, and Z, what's going on with our kids. And then someone brings it up and you're like, are you kidding me?
Right. So for narcissistic people, that's a power play, right? Because for them, they've got a piece of information, right? So you might wonder, what do? Do you not just tell them in the first place? In some ways, that's almost a better play.
Right.
Because they're dropping bait. They're dropping chum in the water because it's sport to them, right? So if you say nothing and then someone asks about the job thing, you may be less startled because you set a boundary. Someone violated that boundary. You're almost shocked by, they did what? And now you're also on your back foot with this person coming at, like now people are coming. If someone casually, not meaning it maliciously, asks about your job, even if the narcissistic person does, because again, this is why you don't tell them bad news. Don't tell them good news. You don't tell them anything. So it would be bizarre for them to come out of left field. They may ask the question just because they are asking a question. And then you might be better armed with, it's like, I'm just sort of, it's like, it's a whole thing right now.
Yeah, you just can't set them up.
You can't set them up. And this is where though, I often feel like people are being really led astray by a lot of the boundary advice, because a lot of the boundary advice is predicated on the other person not being narcissistic. So they dutifully read their little boundaries books and they're like, I'm going to do this because this relationship really feels like I always feel like uncomfortable and invalidated. So I'm going to set a boundary. Yeah. Doesn't work. And it actually leaves people feeling more foolish, more gaslighted, more hurt, and it makes it worse. So it's a different rule book for these relationships.
When you talk about gaslighting, can you explain what some people I feel like know what gaslighting is, and then other people are getting very misinformed about the true context of what gaslighting is? So
gaslighting is really a form of emotional abuse, but what it is that it's a tactic in a relationship that really is designed to destabilize another person. And it involves that in order for gaslighting to work, you have to trust the gaslighter. And why would we trust someone? Because they're our partner, they're our spouse, they're our family member, they're a friend, they're someone who's been in our life, so we trust them. Or they're an person with expertise, like a healthcare professional would be a great example of that, right? So you have to have that trust, because that means their voice means something. Then they will, then whatever, you're communicating with them. And at first they're either going to doubt your memory, your perception, your experience. So that never happened. I never said that. I didn't touch that thing. I didn't move that thing. So that's what they'll say initially. And of course, you trust this person. You're like, that's weird. Like, I could have sworn you said that.
And you start to think that you're crazy.
And then, but see, that's not the end of gaslighting. That's just phase one. The second part of gaslighting is where you're like, gosh, I could swear you said that. I'll say, your memory, like, you don't remember anything. I don't know what's wrong with you. Like, there's something, you're like mentally off or something. Like, I don't know, your baby brain, are you having your period? Like that kind of thing. You don't remember anything. So now it's not just that I didn't say that, but there's something wrong with your memory. So now you're being destabilized further, because you're thinking like, well, I am sort of overwhelmed and I'm not remembering stuff. So maybe they're right. Maybe I didn't remember it. But it doesn't happen just once. They keep doing things like this over and over and over again. Sometimes it's things like that you'll say, well, I'm just stating how I feel. And they'll say, well, your feeling's wrong. And gosh, you're too sensitive. That's an example of gaslighting.
Oh, I hate that.
You see what I'm saying?
More than anything.
Your feeling's wrong and you're choosing. How can a feeling be wrong? Right? I mean, they feel the way they feel. It is, you might think it's an unusual feeling. It's an unexpected feeling, but it's their feeling. There's no wrong answer on that one. So that's what gaslighting does. And over time, it leaves a person questioning reality, questioning their history, questioning their memory, their perceptions, who they are. And they do think that there's now something wrong with them. Because remember, it's predicated on you trusting that gaslighter. That's why it has so much power. Gaslighting works, because either you trust or there's some form of power differential too. The person with more power will gaslight, and it gives them even more power, right? The gaslighter then really holds all the power, because again, they get to hold reality.
Yeah, I mean, I've definitely experienced that in my past relationship, where to the point of where you feel like, I mean, it can go as far as you're so detached from, you don't know what's real, you don't know what is not real and what the truth is, and then you start questioning everybody, and then you get into this really messed up mind space, and then sometimes you're like, I don't want to be on this earth. This is way too confusing. Relationships are way too complex, and it could literally, I've been in that place where you go into such a dark hole where you would just rather be dead.
Some people do, or they give in entirely. So the other thing that happens with gaslighting, if it happens for long enough, especially if the person doesn't know what gaslighting is, they don't fully understand it, they just keep going along, almost taking on that role of being an impaired, disorganized. Like, people who've been gaslighted for long enough, who might actually be very organized, well put together people, will start to believe, I'm disorganized, I'm distracted, I don't pay enough attention, I have memory problems, I don't remember anything. They will actually give voice to that as though that's their identity, that's who they are, that's an impairment that they have. And if the gaslighter is, if you will, successful, the gaslighted, the gaslightee, I don't know what we call the person being gaslighted, just goes along. They don't even question anymore. They you've lost all sense of equity in the relationship. Like the gaslighted person is forever sort of subjugated and sort of and then the gaslighter gets to hold all the reality. It's basically, look, the sky's pink, and the other person's like, yep.
Do you feel people that are going through divorce or going through any sort of breakup, that the best type of communication is written communication over verbal?
100%. If you're going through a divorce with a narcissist, writing is everything, because they will gaslight you. They will say, you never said that. And this is why the family apps have come up. My Family Wizard and Talking Parents and all that. Those came into being.
I know those so well.
Oh, yeah. To create a sort of a legally admissible record of communication, because they'll play it fast and loose. They'll go from WhatsApp to texting to emailing to this. I sent you the email and you're looking there. Oh, no, it was WhatsApp. And before long, you've lost track. So this was these apps, again, which are now admissible into court record, have become one way, but everything in writing in these relationships. And the tighter, the better.
And the narcissist does not want to do writing. It's,
no.
Can I get you on the phone for 5 minutes?
Always.
Let's talk. I don't want to do this over text. It's always that. It's like, okay, come on. And then as soon as you get smart and you understand what they're doing, you're like, then you when I say set the boundary, I know there's no boundary setting with narcissists, but you say, no, this is...
Well, that's a boundary, right? So in other words, there's a great example of if they say, but here's the difference. You're divorced. You've made that decision. You're now done. So the ultimate boundary was set. I'm not doing this anymore. I'm not being married to you anymore, right?
Right.
So that's a huge boundary.
But the narcissist will actually go file divorce before you. Yes. So it's the image of not being, it's like, okay.
Right, fine, great.
Side note,
and I always tell people, because there's no legal advantage to doing it one way or another. So if that helps them feel better, let them have the little ego kind of kick. But that idea of, okay, as you say, I am not doing get on the phone, say, just write it down. And once you write it down, we can talk.
Yeah.
I just want it for my records.
Yeah.
And so that's a boundary, right? But you will fight for that thing to get written down. And that's the problem, is that it's a fight and a fight and a fight. How much can people keep fighting for this stuff before they're absolutely exhausted?
Oh, it's exhausting. And when I say exhausting, because I have experience with this, it's not just like, oh, I'm tired. It's your body and your energy feels like your soul has been sucked out of you. And then you think that something like there's like some health issue, because you're like, I've been zapped of my energy. And then you realize, oh, it's the emotional, like you have to put up this bubble and protect your energy.
Yeah, well, it's protect your energy. It's something I actually talk about in the book. I call it soul distancing. That if you're going to be in the presence of the narcissistic person, you almost have this visual of like, okay, I'm walking in there with my mind, with my body, but that soul part of me, that part that can still be like, that they can come for the essence of me, I'm not bringing that. Like the part of me that keeps the trains running on time.
That's going to stay attached.
That's it. Yes. That. And so you can kind of be in there, and it can be a lot of sort of yellow rocked. Sure. Yeah. That's right. Yeah. 6 o'clock. The soccer game's at 6. Yep. And so it's a lot of that. And then when they try to throw in the baits, oh, what you doing this weekend? Say, this and that, like you're giving them vague answers, nothing they can, because they're looking for bait so they can find that place to poke.
Okay, let's talk about your book. I am so excited. It's not you. What inspired you to write? I mean, obviously your life work of this, but can you go into a little bit more detail?
So there's a lot of books about narcissism out there. I've written some of those books about narcissism. I've written books about narcissistic relationships too, but it's usually about the narcissist, the dynamics of the relationship, how it works, what it's about, where it comes from. Very little of this literature is about how do you heal? What happens to the person? Because at the end of the day, it's not, the narcissistic part isn't that deep. What it is, how it shows up in the relationship. I think everybody, people's grandmas know about love bombing now. People you never think would know what these words mean. Everybody knows these words now. They may not know them absolutely accurately, gaslighting, things like that. Not everyone's getting it. But what do you do? Like, just like you said, well, boundaries. And I'm saying, well, the boundaries thing's not going to work here. And so it's the radical acceptance. It's understanding that now you know what this is. There's going to be a lot of grief, and it's going to hurt because you believe that this would be your person. You were going to grow old with this person, that you didn't want to have your parents grow up. You don't want to have your kids grow up between two parents, that you don't get a second chance at your childhood, that your family members never going to behave well at these gatherings, that other people who have their close-knit families, that doesn't get to be your story. It's a lot. It's not as simple as, I get it, now what? It's, I get it, and oh gosh.
Okay, when is the book coming out?
So the book comes out on February 20th. Order it right away. Because if you order it right away, that first week, it gets more buzz. And because here's the thing, no matter how much it feels like I'm talking to everyone and people who get this, there's a lot of people who are going through this who don't even know. They're just sort of in a relationship where they think it's all their fault. This is a book to tell them it's not you. So let's get the buzz this week. So go order it. Listen, you're walking through the wasteland post Valentine's Day, and those 50% off chocolates aren't going to carry you wholly. This will finish it off.
Everybody go purchase this book for everyone you know. Not a lot of people know this topic like you do. And I think it's really important for people to heal and, like you said, radical acceptance. And how do I move forward? Because some of those people will be in your life for 18 years. Some people will, are your mother. So there's like this weird dynamic of unconditional love and then dealing with this personality.
Yep. Yeah. And it is and because some of these relationships are not relationships people can easily get out of, right? One piece of guidance I never give to people, because this book is not taking on, for example, physically abusive relationships and all that. So this is really sort of those moderately midstream narcissistic relationships where there's enough manipulation, gaslighting, invalidation that it doesn't feel good. It's taking a toll on you, but it's definitely not the menace and the coercion that we'd see in a more malignant relationship. But not everyone can leave. For a variety of reasons, for financial reasons, for custody reasons, for cultural reasons, religious reasons. There's still a little bit of hope, whatever the reasons are. And I always say that's fine. I get that. People say, I cannot just walk away from my parents. If I do that, then I'm going to lose other family members I care about. It's complicated. So one of the upshots of this book too is how do you heal? Even if you have to stay in these relationships, like, is that possible? And it absolutely is. Is it harder? Yes, because you still have the bad behavior, the bad treatment that they're putting you through. That's still happening, but there are different ways to sort of process it, to be with it, to care for yourself in the midst of it, and other things you can build up in your life, like good supports, those people to take that good news to, for example, so you at least have some sort of buffer. For so long, people believe, I can get through to this narcissistic person. I love them. There were these good moments. And that's what's tricky about these relationships, that there's always a couple of good moments in there. There will be a moment of laughter. They will remember something that matters to you. They will say something nice to you. You may still be attracted to them. Whatever it is, you'll say there's this thing that happened that's good, and then boom, there'll be the bad thing. And that push-pull between the good and the bad is what makes these relationships so unique. If they were always bad, right? If someone's always dealing with someone who's cruel, it's awful. But it's almost a little easier than this. These relationships can also pull for pity and guilt and confusion and justification and all the stuff that makes it hard, not only for people to get out, but get out in a way where they don't blame themselves.
There's a lot of healing, which, again, is so great that this book is for those specific groups of people. Gosh, I can only imagine if someone tried to pull something with you, boy.
Oh, hon, it happens to me all the time. But here's the thing. I wish I could say that. Listen, I've been through it. I've been through it in every kind of relationship you could imagine. Intimate relationship, friendship, workplace, family. I've had it happen in all those arenas, right? And there's some narcissistic people in my life I'm no contact with and hope I never see again. And they really harmed me, and I will never forgive them for that. There are some I don't have a choice. For whatever reason, they're embedded in systems in a way I have to keep interacting with them for, for a bunch of different reasons.
Right.
And I'm gotten much, much better. Now I pretty much, it's 7 days a week, like 12 hours a day, I do this. But what it's resulted in, even though when people quote unquote still do it to me, it's resulted in a Dr. Ramani that's actually keeps to herself a lot more. Because obviously, if I don't go out in the world that much, I can avoid this. So when I'm in what I call like mixed use groups, like when I'm in groups of people where I'm not sort of they've got party. It's a great example. I didn't invite all the people to the party. It's my friend's party, right? And that's usually when I'll most often encounter them, right? And so if that's easy, right? It's a party. I can just sort of do the, like, oh, nice to meet you. And then I'm out. Like, and I'm not going to interact with them again. But you know, though, that you don't trust, and that can make it hard, for example, to grow a business. That can make it harder to, I don't know, to collaborate with people in a way, or go into, big events and feel comfortable, because you do wonder, like, who can I trust? It definitely usurps your trust, for sure.
Yeah. I mean, I definitely have found myself, and the pandemic actually didn't help this, but really even coming out of, a divorce, you just become a hermit. You become introverted, and that's not. I don't want anyone to ever feel like they have to do that, because that's not what life is about. It's
not. I mean, you look at people. If you love, you're going to lose. You're going to get hurt. It's built into the model, right? And so this is a unique kind of hurt. And I think if people recognize that, once you have the tools and you're willing to recognize it and engage in the self-compassion that it's okay to disengage from someone who's harming me, which is a big leap for people, by the way, just to be able to say, like, yeah, no, this isn't okay, and I'm going to step away from it. When people can get there, then they actually get themselves to the place where they may be willing to take more chances, meet more different people. But it's hard. It's hard for people who've been through narcissistic abuse sometimes to feel comfortable getting back into intimate relationships. It's hard for people who have been harmed by a narcissistic family system to trust anybody, because that's their first fundamental relationship with trust.
I like to think that I could have that kind of relationship, but it feels impossible sometimes for me,
Yeah, I understand that.
I've been with my partner, Jeff, for, oh my gosh, almost 7.5 years, and we've been engaged, and it's like, when are you getting married? It's like, if you knew the fears behind all of it, from the craziness of, like, having to do a prenup / post. I mean, I went through hell, but I have to remember that there's good in people, and not everyone is a narcissist, and not everyone's going to be abusive, and that you can have a beautiful, loving relationship. It just, there's a lot of healing.
There's a lot of healing, and there can also be a tentativeness. I've worked with folks who are they've gone through a horrific narcissistic relationship, especially one where there's been a lot of betrayal and infidelity. That's a big one. And then they finally let some time pass and get into a new relationship. And that's really their trigger, right? And so it's also about meeting someone who will meet them halfway, and for them to understand, like, shady stuff's just not going to fly here. Even anything that's in the neighborhood or a border town to if shady is not going to work, because it's too much, and that that if you find that healthy person, they'll be able to have that level of communication and be open and not do stuff that doesn't feel uncomfortable. I mean, that's when we fall in love with somebody, we meet them and we take them in with their histories. And I think if you really love someone, you really are a custodian, a caregiver of their vulnerabilities. You don't tread in those places. So if you know something is their thing, whereas another partner, it might not have been a thing, when you have a partner where that is, in a healthy relationship, they will meet you on that. And if you were to meet someone who says, well, I didn't cheat on you, so this isn't my problem, red flag, get out. That's not your person.
That's really interesting. Okay, I'm going to have to take some of these principles into my relationship. Yeah, it's difficult. You really, I feel like, for me, I had to, over time, show Jeff, who's my partner currently, just explain to Jeff the wound, so he knew how vulnerable and fragile I was, especially at the beginning of the relationship. Like, you can't expect someone to know what you've been through, so you have to share that and explain it to them. Because listen, if they love you unconditionally, they're going to want to take care of what that inner child, right? They have a responsibility. That's what true, lasting love is. So you get the good and the bad.
Yeah, you do. Exactly. And that with when somebody is solicitous and custodial and caregiving of that wound, of that inner child, trust builds, right? And so then over time that it's not like they're forever going to be helping, like having to be so careful. The more of that trust that happens, the more a person feels back more in their body and more in their psyche, and they feel comfortable with themselves. So that's the process. And like I said, that's just never going to happen in a narcissistic relationship.
Yeah.
Excuse me. It's never going to happen. No.
So do you feel like people that have dealt with abusive narcissists, there's a place for them, like a community, like a support group? Do you find that to be helpful? Or I know you do seminars, right?
I do. So I have a healing program. I have a monthly healing program that people who have experiencing narcissistic abuse are in. We have a community platform where they can support each other. And their support of each other is probably one of the most robust parts of our program. Because when I see how they support each other, it's really that you see someone who is maybe further down the track than you. And you're like, okay, this is possible. Or they fully understand and say, you're absolutely not crazy. This happened to me too. Knowing that these things have happened to someone else, it's not that anyone wants someone else to suffer the way they have, but knowing that someone else has sort of come back from it or is moving forward with it, it makes such a big difference. And I've worked with many survivors who will say like, I have friends who are at different stages of this. And it is really, and they'll say it's sometimes they feel a sense of survivor guilt. Like I've come this far and I'm watching my friend who's now in the beginning phase of it. Yeah. But they do also hope that they represent some hope. And for even the folks who've been through it, say, wow, a reminder of how far I've come. I am a big fan of survivors spending time with each other. Group therapy works great for survivors, just being in groups, because not everyone gets this. The fact is, although there's a lot of narcissistic folks out there are some people out there who've gotten lucky. This isn't their parents. This isn't their family of origin. This isn't their spouse. This isn't a significant relationship in their life. And there's a lot of those people out there. And then there's also the narcissists themselves who, of course, are denying any of this is happening. So people going through this sometimes feel like they come up against a world where they're doubted and questioned and viewed like there's something wrong with them.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. Well, where can everyone go to see that, your program?
So they can go to my website, drramani.com. Okay. Or they can go to my Instagram. It's in my bio. But if you go to my website, you'll see how that works. And you can join and check it out. And people can join and drop out and join back in and drop out. There's no commitment. You could do it for a month if the topic of the month is interesting. The nice thing is if you join, you have access to all our many, many months. Every month we have a workshop, we have a Q&A session, they have the community platform, we do 3 journal prompts a month, there's a guided meditation. So there's a lot you get from it. So you can try it, and then once you join, you have access to all those past months of it too. And you can just sort of look at the different programs, and then if you decide to keep going, keep going.
Okay. I'm sold. I'm signing up. I need a community because that's what it is. It's like
it's a great community.
You don't want people like, oh gosh, the pandemic and what it has done, I think, to the world and just getting back there. I feel like people are getting a little more comfortable with getting on Zooms and but getting in person and talking about these things and just being vulnerable and open and knowing that you're not alone.
Right. And then this program's virtual because it gives us people from all over the world. But I do think that, yes, in person goes a long way too. But I think just knowing someone else has been through it and there's nothing wrong with you is what because when we see it's happened to someone else, we're very quick to say, well, there's nothing wrong with you. They're the one who did it. But they can't heed that in their own life. That's why helping others helps, because there's a point at which you're like, okay, I'm being a hypocrite if I'm able to call it out in their life, but not see it in my own.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
What the takeaway from this book is, you absolutely can have your love story. And it's actually much deeper and richer when sometimes you've been through something like this, because when you're in the presence of really empathic, compassionate love, you have an appreciation for it like nothing else if you've been through this. So it could, like I said, this is a wake. This isn't just sort of narcissists are bad, now here's how to fix your broken heart. This is really about finding the power within you that was always there, but was really silenced for a long time because you were in an invalidating relationship.
Yeah. Well, thank you.
Thank you
so
for
much.
having me, and thank you for this conversation.
Of course. Okay, we did it. Wow, what a powerful, beautiful episode with Dr. Ramani. I'm so thankful that she is able to come in person, and there's a lot to take away. I hope that you guys know that it's not you. And that is the title of her new book, and I'm super excited to dive in and read it. And For those of you who have not subscribed to the podcast yet, please do. It helps me create more beautiful content and share all these amazing stories and bring on experts and people with you guys. If you're on Apple, it's a plus sign. If you're on Spotify, it's a follow. If you guys need help, I will set something up in my Instagram where you guys can go and I'll give you step-by-step directions, because believe me, it's a little confusing for me too. I'm just new to this whole podcast world. So again, thank you for tuning in, and I will see you next week.
Yay Networks.